We buy an island and just start our own country.
I mean, I think so. What? So like shit, toilet paper, shit, toilet paper is like it was like a lasagna.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Doomscroll Club, where the news is dark, the takes are sharp, and the group chat is permanently unhinged. Today, we're diving headfirst into a fresh pile of political chaos and legal fuckery. We've got Trump's so called big beautiful tax bill, which, spoiler alert, might be beautiful for billionaires, but not so much for, the rest of us. Then we're breaking down the Supreme Court's newest ruling that just gutted nationwide injunctions, a quiet move with loud consequences. We've also got updates on trans healthcare and why access is becoming even harder to fight for. So grab your caffeine, your coping mechanism of choice, and let's climb into it. I'm Calvin.
I'm Cody,
Welcome to the
and
DSC.
yeah, and doom scrolling is more fun with friends. So yeah, let's do this. Let's doom scroll. So yeah, where do you want to kick it out? Or actually, what's been going on with you, Calvin? How you been doing? How's life?
I'm a little burnt out. Just been working. I've had a hard time this week trying to keep up with the news because I've been working so much. I get home and make dinner and then pass out.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, sometimes it's not the worst because then you're not so informed in all the bullshit going on in the world. But then you kind of have to cram the world bullshit into talk about what's going on. So
Yeah,
marathon doom scroll,
yeah,
a binge scroll.
yeah.
So
How
for
about
all the
you? What's going on
listeners,
with you?
about the same, but just sorry, like what do you do for work? Just so people know a little bit about you.
What do I do for work? I'm technically, I believe my title is I'm the content director for a production company up here. So
Nice.
I'm script writing, producing, coming up with video ideas, and then also filming. I
Very
kind of do
cool.
everything. Yeah,
Yeah, that's awesome.
yeah.
Yeah, much more exciting. I think if you don't know, I'm a nutrition coach, which is, not usually the type of topics we talk about as a nutrition and fitness coach. But you know what? Not everything needs to be about nutrition and fitness. But anywho, yeah. So life for me about the same. Busy. Didn't spend as much time doom scrolling, but found enough to doom scroll about and talk about. So yeah, excited to get into it. Is there anything you want to start with in particular?
I think we should probably just jump straight into this tax bill that's been pretty pushed. I believe the latest version was 980 pages, and it was given to the Senate like 24 hours before they were supposed to make a vote on it.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think that's probably where we should start.
Yeah, I saw, I forget who it was, I can't remember, but some politician that wanted to delay it and basically take 15 hours to read the entire bill. And I think some people were, not so fond of that idea, but I'm like, I think that's a great thing to do because the last time they voted on this, there were some things that they didn't read. And
Hmm.
some people would have been like, I never would have voted for that if I would have read that.
Exactly.
And that was on the conservative side of things. So,
Yeah. I don't think there should ever be any pushback for requesting time to review a document. I think.
yeah. And it just shows like if you're not allowing people enough time to read through it, that just kind of shows you have something to hide or something that, people might not be so fond of that are less likely to vote on it if they see those things. So, yeah, that's fun. I know with the, spending bill, the biggest thing, I even saw Elon Musk, once again tweet about it. Do you want me to read what his tweet was about it? People are like, oh no, Trump's going to be pissed again. So, uh, for the latest Senate draft bill. So it says the latest Senate draft bill will destroy millions of jobs in America and cause immense strategic harm to our country. Utterly insane and destructive. It gives handouts to industries of the past while severely damaging industries of the future. So I think that has to do with like budget cuts for clean energy and stuff like that. So obviously Elon's business relies on people trying to be more
Mhm.
environmentally friendly and things like that. So he's definitely not happy. So also like a little summary of what's in the bill. Do you want me to go over that? So we get so tax cuts. So it makes 2017 tax cuts and jobs permanent, adds no taxes on tips, overtime up to $25,000 slash 12,500 deductions through 2028. The thing with that too, I was thinking, cool, no tax on tips, but there never was like people didn't get their tips taxed if they were in cash anyways.
Hmm.
So it's only like when people use card. So
But
boost child tax credit to 2,200 permanent versus houses 2,500 temporary, and raises the senior deduction to 6,000 through 2028. Adult cap jumps to 40,000 for 5 years. Spending cuts slashes 1.3 trillion over a decade, targeting Medicaid, work requirements, provider tax caps, SNAP, requiring work rules, state cost sharing, and then green energy credits phased out with Senate slowing the cut. Border slash military, so allocates 350 billion for border security, 46 billion for the wall, 45 billion for 100,000 detention beds, 10,000 new ICE agents with 10,000 bonuses. Debt ceiling raises it by 5 trillion to cover existing bills. So it ends Biden era EV home energy tax credits, adds $1,000 Trump accounts for newborns, and tweaks HSA's, example $500 to slash $1,000 fitness caps. So doesn't that also defeat the Maha initiative, cutting stuff for like preventative care, fitness? So yeah, there's also like a list of pros and cons, but generally I feel like the cons outweigh, especially when it comes to healthcare. That's, I think, the thing that people are focusing on the most, at least on the left.
hmm
But like Medicaid work rolls could kick 10.9 million people off insurance, hitting low income and trans folks hardest. Rural hospitals might close due to provider tax caps and trans care defunding. Speculated they're kind of pushing for it. Lacks transparency.
hmm
So that's kind of the biggest thing that like I feel like we would probably be impacted by.
I also, side note, want to say whenever someone refers to Maha, I don't know if you're a Nickelodeon kid as I was, but it just makes me think
Yes.
of the Amanda Show when she had the character who her stalker was, and she would go Maha. So that's what plays in my head whenever someone says that. I'm like, yeah,
That's hilarious. I was a
yeah.
Nickelodeon kid. I didn't watch too much of the Amanda Show though. If it was on, I'd probably catch the intro of her little
Mhm.
like dialogue in the beginning, and then that was it from there. I'd watch like all that and stuff,
Mhm.
but that one I never really got into. So,
We're gonna have
but
to
that's
find
funny.
like a little clip and have it like pop into the screen every time we talk about
It was like Maha.
it. Yeah,
That would be great.
yeah. Uh,
So
yeah, no,
yeah,
I think, it's, obviously all of this who's hitting the worst is going to be low income families, just low income people. You don't have to be a family, obviously, and it's not, it's insurance, is huge, especially when you're talking about, I want to say pre-COVID, not that, there wasn't any health issues before, but, I feel like now it's, younger people are also getting sick a lot more. I've seen my health, you know, I get sick a lot more than I used to. But also just like food stamps and all that, it's affecting not only adults who can or, and according to the government should be able to, afford it or find more work, but it's affecting children. Children can't go get jobs. They shouldn't go get jobs. They're kids. They should be focusing on school and, learning, how to make it in society. And they shouldn't have to be stressed about if they're going to have 3 meals a day. Um, and it's just we're cutting from the people that need the help the most, giving the best tax benefits to the highest earning people in the country, which I can understand as a business owner, and you probably can reflect with this too because you own your own business. But I can understand the fact of like, oh, I'm gonna make more money. That's great, but oh, great, my taxes are higher. So now I'm kind of like, I understand, losing a part of that profit, but the people that are really getting that should be getting really hit, that money doesn't really affect them. as it does, a middle class or a lower class person. So I just nothing's gonna come good from this. I've seen so many videos already of Trump supporters or certain Republicans where they're talking about like their taxes are so high right now, and they're complaining, and then they find out that their taxes are so high because they're under the Trump tax plan. They weren't under Biden or Harris's tax plan; it was Trump's tax plan. So yeah, I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I was wondering was like, what would the work requirements be? Because like there is a certain extent or, a certain amount where it's like, okay, there's a fine line, I guess, between like enabling and, like I know there's people that cheat the system,
Absolutely.
but I also don't want to punish people who are not cheating the system, like those people that ruin it for everybody. So as far as the work requirement goes, basically this is what it would be. It'd be community engagement requirements for Medicaid, so targeting able bodied adults with dependents. The Senate version, per recent draft, set this at 80 hours per month, so about 20 hours a week of work, education, or community service starting December 31st, 2026. This builds on the House's One Beautiful Bill Act, which had a similar rule, but with a slightly earlier date, October 1st, 2026. States can opt in, and eligibility checks would double to twice a year. So, it does say it would be targeting abled bodies, so it wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
be someone who is like legally disabled and is already like collecting disability or something.
Mm-hmm.
And then without dependents. So it's just people that don't have kids. So it wouldn't necessarily be affecting kids because, yeah, it's just babies, basically like single people that are requiring SNAP or Medicaid benefits. Um, but yeah, so Medicare doesn't have work rules, but about 12 million people are dual eligible, Medicare and Medicaid. If
Mm-hmm.
Medicaid coverage drops due to work requirements, these folks, often low income or disabled, could lose Medicaid's help with Medicare premiums and cost sharing. So the CBO estimates 1.3 million dual eligibles might lose Medicaid, indirectly screwing their Medicare access. So that's probably like where most of the shit comes from. So I guess some Republicans floated tightening Medicare eligibility, citizenship verification, but the Senate flagged this as out of order. It's not the current draft, so it's likely dead unless revived with a fix. The bill also delays rules to streamline dual eligible enrollment, adding barriers that could kick people off both programs. Uh, so, yeah, the healthcare stuff is a hot mess,
Mm-hmm.
it sounds like. And I know somewhere in there, in those cuts, they're going to try to cut trans healthcare in there as well. They haven't been super vocal about it, but I think it's in there trying to hide.
Yeah, yeah. I saw something recently where I can't remember what was being if it was brought to the Senate. It was just going through a video, but if someone was talking about something was brought to the Senate or somewhere, I'd have to double check. But it was basically the Project 2025.
Yeah.
So we knew it was coming. They said it wasn't, but we knew it was coming. Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't know, man. I don't want to be here anymore.
I know. It's like, I don't know. I don't know entirely, um, what is in it. Uh, Neither does the people voting on it. So I'll have to like keep digging, taking a better look. But again, busy week, so didn't have a whole lot of time to do so. Uh,
Yeah.
but yeah, I think I think we have a lot of trans listeners. How it might affect trans people specifically? Let me see if I can find a little thing on that. Okay, so yeah, so update on the Supreme Court's June 18th ban on minors gender-affirming care, Trump's leaked rule to defund adult surgeries, and the Trevor Project hotline shut down. I don't know, that was, yeah. So the Senate's tax spending bill, June 28th vote, they just voted on yesterday and it passed the Senate, might cut healthcare funds, possibly defunding trans care to appease conservatives. So 2.8 to 4.7 trillion deficit impact. Um, so that's the part where, our community would probably be feeling the biggest hit. But I know there's a bunch of other stuff in there that not a lot of people are happy about. Not even Elon Musk. So
Yeah. Well, since we're already jumping into trans healthcare updates, should we just go straight to that segment?
sure, let's do it.
All right. So, as you said, June 18th, the Supreme Court decided to uphold Tennessee's ban on transgender youth medical care with a 6-3 vote. The ruling applies a rational basis review affirming the state ban doesn't violate equal protection, and it struck down challenges. The effect is 27 states now with youth care bans impacting over 100,000 trans minors.
Yeah, yeah. So that's kind of like just how we kind of talked about last week. It's I don't feel like a sweeping ban is ever the answer. I know there's a lot of controversy around it, and I don't think we have an absolute right decision, but I just don't think that an absolute ban is the right thing to do. Usually conservatives are wanting smaller government, so why would we be voting for the government to have a bigger hand in your child's care?
Mhm.
It should be up to the parents, just like how they're fighting to, it should be up to the parents whether their kids they can pull their kids out of classes that educate on LGBT topics.
Mhm.
So, they're all about choice, right?
Yeah.
Except for when it comes to like abortion and anything outside of the
Yeah.
Bible. But yeah, they seem to just keep giving the government more control versus like staying out of people's lives, letting parents
Hmm.
make that decision for them. That's how it's supposed to be for parents making medical decisions for their kids. But unfortunately, they're stripping that part away, and they might think that they're like protecting kids or whatever. But I just don't think that's for them to decide on. So yeah.
I mean, we're you and I are lucky that we're in California. I was in Florida for a short amount of time, and so my heart definitely goes out to. Sorry, that's my dog scratching. If you can hear that. My heart goes out to those families and minors who dealing with all of this political stuff. But it's one thing to grow up not comfortable in your body and kind of figure out who you are, and get that hope of becoming comfortable with yourself and being on the outside who you are on the inside, and being seen as who you are, and then being targeted as almost like a monster. It feels like you know the trans community is being turned into like a Frankenstein type thing, where we're getting we've got lynch mobs coming after us. It's I've joined a couple like online groups where it's like people who are trying to like talk about leaving the country, and how do they leave the country and what's safe, and unfortunately, unless you have a lot of money, a good career to be able to transfer to a different country that's looking for people in those fields, it's really hard. If we have any listeners yet that are in those states, if you have a kid it's trans, we're here for you if you ever want to reach out and talk. It's easy to be in, I want to say, a quote unquote safe area, but nowhere is really safe right now. We're just kind of delayed in feeling those repercussions, I guess. But we know right now it's youth trans care, and quickly it's going to be adult trans care as well. First it won't be covered under insurance, and then it's going to be like abortions, where it's just going to be illegal to get that done. So hopefully it doesn't get that far, but we just got to keep paying attention and stepping in where we can.
Yeah, like my assumption is that they're definitely going to aim to get it so insurance doesn't cover things, because that's how it used to be.
Mm-hmm.
But we were able to get that covered under Obama, and we know how Trump feels about Obama. So even if he doesn't give a fuck, he gives a fuck about retaliating. We already know
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
So he would love to undo everything good that Obama did do. Yeah, it's frustrating. And of course, there's still a way people used to transition before insurance covered things, but definitely would not be as possible to pursue bottom surgery because that one is just insanely expensive. I wouldn't be
Yeah.
able to do that if insurance didn't cover it. Top surgery is a little bit more doable, but still, it's not
Still a big
doable
chunk of
for a lot
change.
of
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
Yeah, it takes a long time to be able to save enough, even to just if you're going to put it on a credit card, to build the credit to be able to put it on a credit card. So it's definitely concerning. Most of my clients are trans, so that's going to impact. It's going to impact trans businesses and stuff because, like, why would people hire a trainer when they're trying to save money for
Yeah.
surgeries, top surgeries,
Yeah.
etc. So it does have a bit of a domino effect, but at the same time, it's just that you just hate to see people struggle because we know how hard it was having to get surgeries without insurance. It felt damn near impossible. But yeah, so I think I had other thoughts surrounding this. My brain just is like,
Well, I think you're absolutely right. It's I could see insurance. I don't want them to, but I could see insurance taking away coverage for like top surgery, you know, but that is something that is obtainable. It's not something that's easily obtainable, but it's something that, if you save for a couple of years or you get a credit card, you could cover it. Bottom surgery, you're looking at buying a house.
200. Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
$200,000.
Yeah. Yes. Especially the trans community who, a high percentage are low income. Um, that's just an impossibility. So, I mean, I don't know how trans people before had bottom surgery, I mean, honestly, I don't even know how long bottom surgery has been happening for both trans men and women. So I don't know how people afforded it. I don't know if it was cheaper back then because now that, it's not, I want to say common thing because it's not a common thing. It's like 1% of people. Uh, but because it's more known, the insurance companies can now charge a lot more, for every single thing like they do with anything. But yeah, it's just an impossibility to think that to think that anybody could afford it without it being covered by insurance.
Yeah. And if you want a little history lesson, I just decided to Google this. But so transgender bottom surgeries, also known as gender-affirming genital surgeries, have been around for over a century. So with documented procedures dating back to the early 20th century, while initially experimental and not widely accepted. Oh, I would have sucked to be the first one.
God.
uh, these surgeries have evolved significantly with increasing acceptance and refinement of techniques. So, Dr. Magnus Hirschfeld in Berlin played a key role in development of these surgeries, assisting with procedures. We don't need to read all of them. Uh, but 1920s and 30s, these surgeries were primarily performed in Europe during this period, but were still considered experimental and not widely accepted. So Europe is just, blazing trails. Yeah, so they've been around for quite some time. But again, money. It's just very expensive. And they're still, progressing them, especially on like the FTM side of things. There's still a lot
Mhm.
of work that needs to be done. But yeah, the thing I was thinking about, like, I always like to play a little bit of devil's advocate and try to think of what these people are thinking in their brains on that side of thing. Well, first comes religion, right? I grew up in the church. I know their side of things is like they think that people are completely mistaken and mentally ill because,
Mhm.
God created you who you are, you're perfect in his image, that sort of thing. So there's a big push from that group to be like, this is wrong, this is morally wrong. And they also slap that, mental illness label on top of it. And that's why they're so, like, they think that they're doing good. So that's
Mhm.
why they're pushing so hard. But for people who think they're doing good, they're sure being complete assholes at the same time. There's no respect in the process. But if they think we're really that mentally ill, is that how they treat mentally ill people? Just being complete assholes, insulting people, and yeah,
I
cool,
mean, if you
fun
look,
times. Very Christian.
yeah. Well, I mean, if you look at the 50s and 60s, so people were just thrown into asylums.
There's a lot of crazy shit that went down from mental
Yeah,
health.
I mean, you look at any documentary about those times, like it's horrifying how these people were treated. And I'm sure probably that they did that. If you were a lesbian, you got put in an asylum. If you were caught masturbating, you could be put in an asylum. So, geez, it just feels like we've come so far in this world and society, and just we're slipping backwards pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd be interested to understand the thought process of, those first doctors or surgeons who figured out how to do this, or like, I don't know. I mean, we have such strong science today, so I can't imagine, 100 years ago, someone being like, well, maybe if I do this, this will happen, you know.
Yeah. 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 And so I guess I sometimes try to have empathy for the other people, even though they have none. And I just try to think, oh, they think they're doing good. They think they're doing right, and the
Mm,
eyes are lowered and all that stuff. And like I've been there, so I know that thought process. But at the same time, they forget that not everyone believes the same thing that they do because they think everyone should believe what they do, and they think they're saving people because they have the one true religion. And that's the only way to heaven. And that's where it just gets ridiculous. It's like, cool, but let people, even if that was the truth, you still gotta let people make their own decisions. And if they don't want to go to heaven, then cool, they don't have to. But you can't force someone to follow your beliefs because you think they should go to heaven or whatever. Not that they actually care, but anywho.
well, that's also, if that's, I mean, if that's really what happens, like, why would you care? That just means there's more room in heaven for you, if you're going to get through and you're
Right.
not. And I was kind of thinking about that with the whole trans ban in the military. It's like, if you hate us so much, wouldn't you want us on the front lines of war? Like, wouldn't you be pushing for that? I don't know why people are talking about we're possibly going into World War III, and like the draft is probably coming back, and I'm like, well, at least I know I'm safe, like, they can do whatever they want. Like, they're now talking about like stuff that used to not be, if like you had flat feet, or I forgot what the other things were that would disqualify you from the draft, and now it's like, oh no, you're still good now. You can be drafted. And I'm like, well, I'm safe still, you know.
Yep, the whole trans community is safe from being drafted now. But yeah, I think it's just, we're the scapegoat and there's a lot of misunderstanding and they just kind of refuse to understand us. They think they're saving people because there is also uh there's a group of D-trans individuals.
Hmm.
There's some who are still very, trans pro, like, they're supportive of
Hmm.
transition. They just realized it wasn't what they needed. And that happens. Then there's the ones that decide because it wasn't right for them that it's not right for anybody.
Hmm.
And then they go on their little campaigns. You see them, taking pictures together in the White House, and they're
Hmm.
fighting for these things to be passed. They're fighting for these restrictions to be put in place because they were either adults or kids that transitioned and regretted it later.
Hmm.
And it's hard because, I'm not one to be here and deny that the transition happens. It does. And it's happening more and more. But I think
Hmm.
that's because the steps to go through the process have gotten like more and more lenient. And I
Yeah.
know insurance coverage definitely made it a lot easier to like get through all those steps because there was no cost barrier.
Hmm.
Not to say that I think we need to go back there because it was awful, but again, I think we just need more therapy, more time to, socially transition first. Those used to be the rules. Like you had to get a therapist letter, but the therapist was essentially confirming that
Hmm.
you lived as the opposite sex for like 1 to 2 years using your new name and pronouns and like socially living as male, even if you like don't pass or whatever. So they had to like sign off on that that's what you had done.
Hmm.
And now it's like informed consent. You sign a piece of paper. You still need a therapist letter for surgeries.
Hmm.
You need two for bottom surgery specifically, but it's still you have therapists who are basically just letter signers. They're out there to just sign letters, not to actually screen anyone for the process. And I get their mindset in it.
Hmm.
They're trying to help people. They're trying to create less barriers for people, less expenses, so they don't have to keep coming to therapy for years or months because it can get expensive. But I think if we're not paying for the expense of surgery and insurance, if they have insurance for surgery, they
Hmm.
probably have insurance that's going to cover at least most of their therapy. I think we need to require a certain amount of sessions, not just one and done sessions
Hmm.
where they're just literally there to sign some shit for you and then send you on your way.
Yeah.
And I know that's also scary because like that leaves your journey in the hands of someone else. But I can't think of any other better solution. I think there just has to be trans friendly therapists who are trained or know what to look for or know
Mhm.
how to like make you think a little deeper on your journey, not necessarily to just, put up a dead end for you if they don't think it's fair. But I do think we need to make sure people are mentally sound, they're aware, they're self-aware, there's not any underlying, mental health situations that
Or
can
trauma that they're
potentially.
not dealing with.
Right. And that's
Yeah.
been the biggest thing I've seen with detransitioners is they've talked about their trauma, that they didn't work through their trauma first. And so that's what it's like, trauma can do a lot of crazy shit. So it's possible that it could potentially lead to something like transition. So I don't think there's any denying that. I feel like that's pretty common sense. But for some reason, it's kind of taboo to talk about in the community. And it's not saying that trauma turns people trans. That's not what I'm saying. It's just that it can have an impact on your decisions and your identity. So, I think it's worth putting a little more emphasis on these things and making sure that you are actively working through trauma if you do have some. Not saying if you've been traumatized you can't transition. It's just like, no, make sure you are working through
Hmm.
things throughout the process and then get the green light from your therapist that you've spent more than an hour with.
Yeah, yeah. I would say, I mean, it's not equivalent, but it's almost like, someone jumping to weight loss pills because they think that's going to be the solution, but without actually doing the work on themselves. You know what I mean? Like, I think with the therapy, I completely agree. A therapist can't in 1, 2, 3 sessions really understand and help you understand what you're going through. You almost need like a year, multiple years of sitting down and going through. There's going to be some people that, didn't have any trauma in their life at all. And, it's pretty baseline fine and, whatever. But there are people that have had traumatic experience who have had, sexual assault or physical abuse, family abuse growing up. And working through that and making sure that those aren't affecting why someone is wanting to transition and that they're wanting to transition because that's just truly how they feel is really important. I think a lot of the detransition stories that I've seen are usually of people who, it's mostly former trans men that I've seen, but it's usually people who were sexual assault survivors and their internal um, trauma caused them to like in their head, well, if I'm a, subconsciously, because obviously they don't understand that feeling when they're trying to transition, right? This is why there's that disconnect.
Right.
But it's that if I'm a man, that's not going to happen to me again. That's kind of somewhat of that framework. And I don't think anyone in the trans community wants someone to go through what we have to go through and realize that's not what they wanted. Hormones are a wild ride. It's also a lifelong thing. It sucks. And you miss your shot for a day or a week, like it really, like I'm 3 weeks since I've done my shot, so I you feel it. You feel it. And that's without surgeries. And then you go into surgeries and the trauma your body goes through with healing is hard, and that's if you don't have any issues, and a lot of people do have complications. A lot of people, luckily we're getting better and better with medical care and surgeries that we're seeing better results. But I've seen a lot of people where their top surgery scars are not what they wanted, and that creates another part of dysphoria for them because now they don't want to take off their shirt, or they embrace it, and they should, but bottom surgery, you have a lot of people who go through that and it's not what they think it's going to be, and then there's that disappointment, and there's people that love it. It's definitely a spectrum of how you feel, but going through all of that, I can't imagine someone going through top surgery or God forbid even bottom surgery and then realizing, wow, that wasn't what I wanted, and then being stuck with that choice.
Yeah. Yeah. I've only seen one case, one person who went all the way through phalloplasty. and then detransitioned. But that's got to be rough. I don't know what you do at that point. So if we can avoid that, that would be great. Uh, but yeah, usually that isn't what happens. I've seen people be very disappointed with bottom surgery in general. We've both gone through bottom surgery, so like we know how rough it could be, and it's a major surgery. It's a major change, uh, and that's another thing too. Like even if bottom surgery is right for you, you need to be in the right mental space at the time that you are going through it because it's gonna put you through the ringer anywho. So it's like making sure you're stable, making sure your housing situation, your relationships are all stable, so you have support and all that stuff. But yeah, I think ultimately I don't have any answers of what is the best route, but it does suck that there's I think I don't know, there may be like a loud minority of detransitioners that are trying to like get to be stopped for everybody.
Hmm.
And then there's like the pick me's of the community where, we got people like Blair White, Buck Angel, who are like, all these things are happening because the trans community went too far.
Hmm.
And now, the pendulum is swinging. But it's just like, I just think that it's not something conservatives ever wanted, and now that they're aware of it is what the real issue is. I wouldn't say it's because trans people are just overtaking the world. Obviously, we're a very small percentage of the population.
It just feels like it because we're in the news all the time.
It certainly does, and not for the greatest reasons.
Uh-uh.
So that makes it hard. They never, even the people who I'll call them like conservative trans commentators, they only they focus on the same things that cis conservative commentators focus on. They play the same videos, they insult the same people, and it's just like they never emphasize what a good quote unquote example of someone who's trans would look like besides themselves. It's kind of like they are like make it seem like they're the only ones that are truly trans in a way, or they go so far as to just it's like I'm not one to deny biology. That's the thing, conservatives are always like, you always have XX chromosomes. And I'm like, yeah, no shit, Sherlock. I understand that, but no one can see my chromosomes, so I don't give a fuck. But they're like, tell us we are denying science and biology. And it's like, I am perfectly aware that biologically I am a female, but that doesn't fucking matter because at the end of the day, I don't regret transitioning for a second, and I'm so happy that I was able to do so. Like it has improved my life exponentially. So I don't give a fuck about their, quote unquote science. And the only time they care about science is when it comes to chromosomes. Everything else, they're like, yeah, Noah's Ark was definitely real. He fed all the animals in the world in one little boat as the world was flooded, and for 40 days. It's just like, yeah, that happened.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
anywho, this is a topic I feel like we could just like keep going and going
I know,
on,
I
but
know. That's probably the most knowledge and not knowledge that we have.
right, it's like all the trans stuff. We're like, this is. I mean, I feel like we just need like a healthy way to vent because it's just been so heavy. The tension or just it's in the air. It's tangible. I feel less safe in like being out, like even on the internet because you just get trolled so easily these days. So it's like you find yourself kind of masking it so that maybe only like trans people who come across your profile will notice versus everyone and their mom.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's not so fun times.
Yeah, yeah. But I think there has to be room for people to figure out who they are, and like this isn't just about being trans. This is figuring out your sexuality, figuring out I mean, even like figuring out what you want to do with your life. There's no one is born with like, you know, their whole life planned out in front of them. There's, a journey we all have to make. And I think a lot of the pushback we get from, detransitioners, I think it's coming from a part of shame because they feel like they felt so strongly one way and then realized it wasn't them. And so the only way to, get back to, not feeling shameful about their choice is to like go, completely in the opposite direction and being a negative. We're seeing that with, I don't know if you follow, I don't follow, but it comes up on my feed a lot, but freaking JoJo Siwa, who, created gay pop, and, now she went on Big Brother in the UK and is now with a man.
Yeah.
And so now her whole thing is like, I wasn't lesbian. That just got thrown on me. The queer community just put that on me. It's like, no, like,
I saw that. I was like,
it didn't get thrown on you. Whether or not maybe you're bisexual and you just were pushing, you were finding yourself, and that is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. And there's also, maybe you thought you were into girls and you were a lesbian, and then maybe you just realized you weren't. Or maybe it's both, but you don't want to admit there's both. But there's nothing wrong with like figuring yourself out. You don't have to go completely against something. It can just be like, yeah, I thought this is what I liked, but then I found something else and I realized that's what I liked. That's totally fine. And I think on both sides too, we need to be empathetic and accepting too of that. So instead of being like, well, I mean, we can give shit because she's giving shit to the queer community, but if she was just like, no, I want to be with a man, we shouldn't be like, oh, well, she was faking it this whole time for views. It's like, no, maybe she just, yeah, she kind of manipulated the situation and definitely used it as her persona, but who doesn't in this industry? Like people take advantage of it, but it's just, okay, she's with someone, it doesn't matter. Doesn't affect my daily life. Why should it affect anyone else? Just let her be her. You don't have to listen to her. And I think that's the same with, people who are detransitioning. If someone goes through the process, and whether they just, socially transition, or if they start hormones, or if they actually have surgeries, instead of, being, oh, well, they're not trans now. They're, like, we need to have empathy too and be like, wow, I can't imagine going through all that and then realize that wasn't, I hope they're okay,
yeah, yeah, for sure. And as with the JoJo whatever situation, I saw that she said she felt pressured by the queer community. And it's just like, what? Like, did Lady Gaga feel pressure for the same? She's still a gay icon, and she has not ever been like, I'm a lesbian.
Yeah.
So I'm like, you might have just felt that pressure internally, or your publicists were like, hey, this is a great way to tap into like a new little niche here and get some loyal followers. And so maybe she felt pressured by somebody, but the queer community as a whole doesn't generally push people to identify uh, any certain way. Like, that's only for her to decide.
And I'm pretty sure the queer community was pushing back on that, when she, came out and was like wearing the weird outfits, and her whole personality was based around that. People were just like, there wasn't like, this is the person we've been waiting for. It was definitely like, okay.
It felt disingenuous.
Yeah.
I think that's like, I think I've always felt that from her. I don't listen to her music. I've only just seen like some little clips and stories. I'm like, there's something off about this person. So I'm like, I just don't trust her stuff at all. So whatever.
Yeah. I mean, she's definitely, she's been a kid television star since she was, in Dance Moms or whatever. So I think anyone to be in reality TV like that has probably some like narcissistic personality disorder. But yeah, she's something.
Yeah. Or just growing up on film thinking that you had to perform in order for people to love you, or you have to live a certain way or get people's approval in order to get love. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's part of it, unfortunately. But yeah. Did you want to cover like one more? I was thinking maybe just so we don't go over like the Supreme Court injunctions, because I feel like that's kind of a big one.
Yeah. So do you want to start that one off?
Yeah. So just to give an overview. So SCOTUS's June 27th ruling with a 6-3 limits lower courts nationwide injunctions, boosting Trump's policies, ending birthright citizenship, 30-day grace into funding trans surgeries, ties to ICE raids and trans care, weakening injunctions. So, there's some people that are like, yes, now Trump can like get shit done, but then there's also the fears of overreach. And just to kind of give like a dumbed down version of an injunction, just so, if there's anyone's kind of wondering. So basically, if you think of it like a video game boss fight, so before, one player, which would be the judge, could pause the whole game for everybody, say you're multiplayer, playing, pause it, no one gets to play. But now the Supreme Court, nixed that move. So you have to beat the boss, which is Trump's policies first. So you have to do it level by level, which it's not impossible, but it makes it a lot harder. So they can still, put the brake on things, but it takes a shit ton of time because they have to go to court. And so there's also the worry that basically everything's just going to get like jammed up in court and people might lose some much needed access to things while they're waiting for things to be sorted out. Or, judges can still put a stop to things, but only if it's like a very obvious breach of the Constitution.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it gives Trump more power. So not a great thing.
Yeah, it's definitely taking away this whole checks and balances that our country was built on, and it's especially going to be harder on people who are at risk of being deported because now there's like you said, there's nothing that's pausing that game while we look into the legal aspects and see, and putting that through. It's just, anything can happen right now until it gets up to that final stage, and I'm seeing videos with academics and they're talking about how this is very close to, pre-Civil War, before, like how basically, the country is going to be divided into almost like, different districts. So you're going to have, like California, Oregon, Washington, Iowa, or whatever, like their laws are going to be kind of similar versus, Texas and New Mexico or whatever, so we're going to see a lot more. I mean, hopefully people in our area are going to be a little bit safer because at least California will be able to hopefully put some stops to people in our area, but it's not nationwide. So the people in those other states, there's really no protections for them.
Yeah. For sure. So it gets a little bit more scary. And it even gets a little scarier to think about what if we get, like a Republican governor in California, probably move up to Oregon, Washington. Like, yeah. I'm not even going to lie.
Yeah.
So, yeah, California has a lot more red than people think. There's a lot of rural areas in California that are red, and it's mostly the cities that are blue. So if you look at like a map of California and voting, it almost looks like California is mostly red, but at the same time, just empty plots of land can't vote. So it's not that red. It's just the cities are so dense in California, and that's where most of the blue votes come from. But yeah, it's a little nerve-wracking on that one.
Yeah, for sure. I still think that we need to like pull our money together and just build a commune.
Yes.
Can we buy an island and just start our own country?
I mean, I think so, technically. Epstein did it.
Link for GoFundMe down below. Just kidding. No, we're getting closer and closer to having that authoritarian type of regime by starting to lower these checks and balances. Again, it's my dog just tapping away. But yeah, so I mean, if unfortunately there's not much we can do, we can just, our legal system can keep trying to fight. Unfortunately we're kind of stacked against with the Supreme Court. We have people who are just, bowing down. But yeah, I mean, like I said, we're very lucky right now that we're in California, but all it takes is one election. And, also, who knows, with power, Trump could decide, he's going to arrest Gavin Newsom and just appoint an interim, governor of his choice. Who knows? We're definitely in times that are like unprecedented, and, you want to be like, oh, that's not going to happen, but we're seeing things that, we didn't think were going to happen. So anything can happen, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's hard because, on one hand, you don't want to like freak out unnecessarily and just create more fear in people. But on the other hand, it's like you have to stay kind of on edge to keep watching things, kind of look at patterns and see which way things are kind of trending. And it does trend to more authoritarian control because we know Trump loves to be in charge and control things. So it's a small step. So it's like one little thing to add on the radar of like, okay, I'm going to keep watching, stay on alert, but also not go full crazy drama, being like, we are now in Gilead,
Yeah,
so it's like all we can really do is stay present, stay on alert, keep watch over things. And if things, start to get worse, that's when you start trying to think of like, should I put some things in place?
yeah.
So, but we're
That's I
not
think that's
quite there
the
yet.
yeah, I think that's the scary part. It's like, when do you realize that it's like it's time to get out, or like, oh shoot, now it's too late to get out. Um, or it's too late to do something. It's definitely that, when's the right time move. Even if it is the right time, the like I said, the access to getting out of the country is not easy for most people, especially in the trans community, because we are highly in the lower to mid income, and it's a lot of money. I think I looked, like, if you're looking at like New Zealand, to just ship one pallet of your stuff to New Zealand is like $5,000. And that's not your
Might as well
personal
start
flight.
over.
Yeah, exactly. And that's not your flights, and you have to have work already primed up. You have to have so much in savings, and yeah, it's not easy. So for anyone out there who is concerned about the future, I would just say start just doing your research, and start tucking away money or whatever you need. Make sure you've got a passport, even if the passport's not gonna match your information, but just make sure you have the stuff that if you have to get out, you have some sort of plan. I do believe right now, unless it's changed, I do believe like you can go over to Canada, I think, for like up to 3 months.
I think it's 6 if you
Okay.
are like work from home, remote kind of situation, like a
Okay.
nomad visa.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I think that's, right now currently what they have. You can also try and apply, go for asylum, but from what I've been researching, that's not really a thing for the
For
LGBT
Americans.
community. Yeah, it's basically they won't open that up until like you can prove that if you don't leave the country, you're going to die. And we're
Yeah.
not at that stage yet. So hopefully never. And another thing to note that I've learned, that if you do try and do that, if you do try and ask for asylum going in and you get denied, you can't do it again. So you definitely don't want to just jump the gun. Just make
No.
sure you're doing your research. You know your options. Have an A plan, a B plan, a C plan, and just be there for your community.
Yeah. And like if you're unsure, and you don't want to prematurely apply for asylum, whatever, just like go over on a visitor or a work
Mm-hmm.
visa, chill for a bit, and then you can apply there if things get worse and you're not in danger while you're waiting. This is all very apocalyptic
Yeah,
and feels very like uh, we've gone a little crazy thinking about this, but it's also called anxiety in worst case scenario.
yeah, and I also think it's prepare for the worst and hope for the best. Hopefully nothing. We never get to that point, and it's fine. But you don't want to get to that point and then feel stuck. So it's just making sure you're informed. And even for trans people in those states where healthcare is going to be denied to them, whether you're a minor or possibly even an adult, start researching the states that maybe you can relocate to. It doesn't have to be leaving the country, but have that plan of like, okay, if this happens, where can I go? What can I do? What do I need to relocate to one of those states? Just having a plan, so that way like you're not just stuck.
I feel like we should create a website called like House Swap. So if we have conservatives in California that want to get out, they could trade with like people who like have trans kids or something that want to
Hmm.
move to, a blue state where their healthcare is covered and stuff.
Right.
You're like, all right, let's create this house swap situation. We can make a reality show like Wife Swap. But yeah. So should we go over what we're watching and all that? Just to end it on
Yeah.
a less
Yeah.
like doomsday. I mean, we weren't lying about doom scrolling. We just took it all the way
Seriously.
there.
Yeah.
Also, be careful of echo chambers because if you're in like a left echo chamber, you're going to get a lot of what this conversation was, and it'll freak you the fuck out.
Yeah.
So if you're looking for news, use things like ground news or all sides, so you can get a good balance from both perspectives, and it can form your own opinion. But of course, we're trans, so we're trans and we're anxious. We're gonna go there at times. So we're not saying this is gonna happen. It's just like, here's where our brain goes sometimes. Thank you for that, Trump.
That could have been our podcast name. We're trans and we're anxious.
Yeah, that totally could. Trans and anxious.
We're transious.
Oh man. So yeah.
Yeah, but what I'm watching, I'm still on King of the Hill. That's been, like I said, I've been working a lot, so it's usually I get home, cook dinner, and that's my downtime, is like we just watch King of the Hill, have something light, and then I pass out. We're still also watching Handmaid's Tale, but we've kind of taken a break this week just because it's been a little. What else did we watch? We rewatched, I don't know if you've seen the movie Sinners.
No.
That really good movie, beautifully shot. It's a vampire movie, but it's set in like the, I think like 1930s, 1940s South. So it's really good movie. Absolutely love it. I think we've watched it a couple times now. What else we watched? We just rewatched the 1980s classic Dune, and if you haven't seen that movie, that is a acid trip movie. It's the book is insane, but the movie is, I'm just watching it and I'm like, I don't know, it's amazing but also just crazy. Definitely different than the remake. The remake, is a little more palatable. But yeah, that's what we've been watching. I've also been listening to podcasts explaining the lore of Warhammer. So that's been what I've been doing when I'm like on shoots.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we just finished up the show Dark Matter on Apple TV. It was very good. Anything that has mindfuckery about different dimensions, I am here for, and that's what it was all about. So I just like to think about that possibility, because we're still kind of in that, oh, this is possible, but science, we haven't quite gotten there yet with it being like concrete possibility, but it's fun to think about. So recommend that if you're into kind of, psychological thrillers, mind-bending kind of shows. A Severance would be another one. It's kind of similar in tone.
Mm-hmm.
So if you liked Severance, you would probably like Dark Matter. Also, just watched the poop cruise ship. Did you hear about that?
I've seen little clips from it. Yeah.
Holy fucking shit! Like
Literally.
Just watched it last night, and I am just like, that is a fucking nightmare. It's something you like. New fear unlocked. I am never going on a cruise. You don't think, like, the worst thing you think of is a fucking iceberg, because like Titanic, like, granted they were going around in the Gulf of Mexico, so obviously they're not going to hit an iceberg, but something you would never think about, a fire on board, which ends up cutting out the electricity. So the fire is one thing. They ended up, getting it out, getting it under control, but it burned up the electrical system. So without electricity, nothing works. The ship just floats. You can't flush the toilets. There's no water. There's no nothing. And then what do they do with the food? Like, they can't cook food for people. And then it's not sanitary, because like eventually, so they were told to pee in the showers and then poop in these little red biohazard bags. And people were just like, fuck no, I'm not pooping in a red bag. I think they probably had to stoop to that, because they ended up being out. It was like 6 days. You cannot go. One girl was like, I immediately started taking Imodium. I'm like, constipation is not worth it. I'll poop in a fucking bag. Yeah, so they were, out at sea longer than expected, because they had thought they could get a tugboat to come from Mexico and pull them into Mexico, but they had drifted back towards the U.S., so they had to get a tugboat like from the U.S. to pull them in back towards like Florida. And they were on the ship much longer than they wanted to be. So by the end of the cruise, there was shit and piss coming out of the walls, because it was no longer draining, and there was just piss up in the showers, and when the tugboats were pulling, it tilted the ship, and it all just started spilling.
God.
It was on the like they everybody was like ankle deep in piss. Yeah. Yeah, I was like, I feel like I would prefer an iceberg. I don't know, like,
As someone who's been on multiple cruises and hit an iceberg, yeah,
that's right.
that makes me not want to ever go on a cruise again. That's terrifying. I would honestly rather sink and die.
Yeah, and it was like everyone was kind of people get crazy. It should have been some sort of social experiment because people's survival instincts kind of kick in, and so everyone's kind of just all for themselves, right? And so there's people who, when they were giving out any kind of food that they could, people were just like taking as much as they could and just taking it all for themselves because they were like, I don't know if we're going to get more food, or they're hungry and they want to take it back with them to wherever. And at one point they shut down like the bar and stuff, and they made the worst decision to do an open bar. It might have been like day 3 or something
Hmm.
along those lines, and like people got out of hand, fights broke out. Like it was like, whose idea was that? Now you're gonna have shit, piss, and barf, and who
Hmm.
knows what else all up in the cruise boat. But it probably helped people forget for a second.
Yeah.
That would be the only benefit. But I cannot imagine these poor people where when they're telling their stories of how awful it was, and they did have some footage in there. So yeah, if you're thinking about going on a cruise, highly recommend watching that documentary. It's quite entertaining and terrifying simultaneously. Uh,
I want to check it out, but I'm also afraid I'll never be able to eat again.
oh, you'll be able to eat, but I don't know that you'll ever be able to like go on a cruise or eat on a cruise if you go on a cruise.
That's true.
Oh, yeah. One of the cooks in the kitchen was pretty hilarious. It was this Indian guy, but yeah, he was talking about he was like, I couldn't hold it anymore. He's like, I had to go number two so bad. So he like talks about how he went and used a public restroom, and he said there was just piles of shit stacked on other piles of shit. So it was like shit, toilet paper, shit, toilet paper. He's like, it was like a lasagna.
God.
I'm like, dude, you
He
didn't
probably
have to
never looks at
compare that.
lasagna the same.
That's what he's. It was like at the end, he was like, still has a hard time eating lasagna. But yeah, so it's an interesting one. And it's a series. There's those train wreck ones, so there's
Mhm.
more of those coming out. So I'm kind of like hooked. Like I'm gonna check the rest of them out because I love documentaries. But yeah, anyway, I almost feel like we're kind of on that shit boat cruise right now in life. Just we are one tugboat away from just walking in our own piss and shit.
That's the mantra for the week. We're just one tugboat away from walking in our own piss and shit.
Yeah, fuck, legit. Anyways, yeah. Any last things you wanted to cover?
No, I think that's pretty much it. I mean, the only other big news thing that I saw this week was, Beyonce wearing a very anti indigenous people shirt. Yeah, but maybe we can talk about that next time.
Yeah, we haven't talked about like the Diddy situation at all either, so there's a lot to
Yeah,
cover.
yeah, yeah. I've that's a rough one. I don't think that's. I know that they finished both the defense and prosecution finished, but I don't think they've gotten a ruling back yet. So we'll see. Maybe we'll
Yeah,
talk about that next week.
yeah. I think we definitely should. I've got some thoughts and opinions on that one.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you want to wrap it up today, yeah, don't forget to subscribe and follow us on Instagram at the Doom Scroll Pod. Yeah, I almost said .com. Like, no, it's just at the Doom Scroll Pod on Instagram. And give us a like, leave us a comment, let us know what you think. If you want us to cover any certain topic, let us know as well. But ultimately, just let us know you were here so we know. And
Yeah, let
yeah,
us know if you liked what you're hearing or if we just need to shut the fuck up.
I'm sure there's plenty of that. I'll be willing to tell us that. We already got one today, so
Our first
But
troll.
I know it's a milestone, guys. We're growing up. We got our first troll. May there be many more to come. We're not doing it right if we're not getting trolls, so we're
That's
doing
true.
something right. All right, guys. Thank you so much for listening. Peace out, and we'll talk to you next time.